You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Mulcaster, Mark Newbold, and Dave Tree.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to episode 50. Yeah, that's right. It's episode 50 of Making Tracks, brought to you by the fine folk over at fanfatracks.com. My name's Mark Mulcaster, and I am joined by the head fanfare, Mr. Mark Newbold. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm very well. I'm feeling good for 50, to be fair. It could be worse. In fact, it will be worse next March because I actually am 50, so I'm basking in the happiness of this 50 and already getting ready for the sadness and sorrow of the next one. But you know, shouldn't be too down about it. It's all good. How are you?
I'm good, yeah. I'm going to be 40 next year, so yeah, so we're both, we can both kind of like, commiserate together.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of casting news about the long-awaited Cassian Andor series.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing about that, I think, is the news that it's definitely going ahead. I mean, that they wouldn't, or there wouldn't be so much news bobbling around the major trades. I mean, there's always news bobbling around fandom, and there's plenty of news last night. Everyone's convinced that there's going to be a Ben Solo series, but this came via some of the big trades. I think it was Deadline, certainly Deadline that I saw it in, said that Adria Arjona, who was in Pacific Rim, the second Pacific Rim film, Good Omens, the Amazon series, is joining the show. It reads to me like the lead actress. And of course, Lucasfilm haven't confirmed it, so again, like always, until it's...
Pinch of salt, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, unless it's on StarWars.com or in the Insider or somewhere like that, then it's not confirmed. But as it stands, it's from one of the bigger outlets, so I'm more inclined to think that this has probably got more meat on the bone than other rumours knocking around at the moment. What do you think about it?
I think the reason why we're not getting some of these official announcements is partly because the schedules are still up in the air. And this is just me just kind of like just wondering if this is a way of trying to put an announcement out through like Variety and Hollywood Reporter and all that to kind of say, yes, this production is still going ahead without there being an official confirmation of casting, because potentially there could just be a schedule clash later on or something. So maybe this is why they're doing that. I saw Pacific Rim 2 and I thought Adria was kind of really cool in it. She kind of plays this engineer-y type mechanic and actually played alongside John Boyega's character. And there was this slight love triangle between her and John, and I think it was Sam Eastwood. I think he was the other co-lead.
Oh, Scott Eastwood.
Scott Eastwood, that's the one. There you go. Yeah. She was basically having fun and actually slightly reminded me a little bit of Leia from Empire Strikes Back with kind of like, kissing Luke. As to what character she could play, I don't know. I mean, she's similar heritage to Diego Luna, so potentially it could be a familial relationship, or maybe she's like another kind of Fulcrum agent. She could be like another rebel agent out there, or maybe not necessarily part of Rebel Alliance, but maybe someone who is a sympathizer who's got no love for the Empire.
Or maybe she's Imperial. I mean, that's the sweet thing about this, is that, we've talked about this a lot, that Cassian as a character, the show is sort of built around Captain Andor, and he's the sort of the senior character in the show. But that being said, the era that it's set in, that 5 years before Star Wars and 4 or 5 years before Rogue One, well, same thing really, isn't it? It's a period of the galaxy where the Empire's really got a foothold, jackboot on the throat sort of thing, but the rebellion is building and pulling in all these rebel cells, and you kind of saw that in Rebels, and now you're going to start seeing it. I would imagine you're going to start seeing it in Cassian. So even though Cassian is the character and Diego's the actor that you're going to sort of follow as the thread through all these stories that links them together, as a Fulcrum himself, you make a great point. There are other Fulcrums, we know that. Ahsoka was one, and there's other. I think was Bail a Fulcrum. I could be mistaken, but there's other ones, and you're going to learn about these different things. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure that Cassian had a sister. Perhaps she's maybe the right age. She's a bit younger than Diego, so perhaps she's the younger sister character. It could be Underworld. It could be anything. It's beautiful point of. This is the great point of when you're sort of building up to these shows. we don't really know anything, so everything's hypothesis and everything's on the table. It's a great time to be sort of spitballing about these shows.
Speculate away. There's one thing that you bring up about how she potentially could be an Imperial, and she could be an Imperial. And, you know, I wonder if that's a very dangerous but quite a fertile ground to get recruits from the actual Empire. I mean, obviously, some of them are fairly heavily indoctrinated, but with their experience of being in the Empire, they're going to bring knowledge and secrets, which is going to be vital for the Alliance in that early formative years. Yeah,
that's how they got Bodhi Rook across, and of course, you know, Jin's father was working for the. I mean, he did it with a purpose, didn't he? He kind of knew what he was doing. He was playing the beaten man to sort of plant the seed of the Death Star, the Stardust thing, and all that. So that was beautiful. But of course, Biggs had gone to the Academy, and Luke was dreaming of going to the Academy in the Twin Suns moment. So Han Solo was in the Empire and sort of left. There's all these characters, you sort of realise that the Empire, being in the Imperial Army or the Navy, is the norm, really. If you want to get out the Outer Rim, or you want to leave your home planet and there's nowhere else to go, unless you're savvy enough or lucky enough or unlucky enough to hook up with a smuggler or happen to bump into a rebel cell, which must be like finding a needle in a haystack, generally the route out is to join the Empire. At least you're training to be a soldier, training to be some sort of military man or woman, training to learn how to fly a TIE fighter, which you look at TIE fighters and you've seen it through canon over the years going way back. It really is like flying an air balloon with an engine on it. They're not the easiest things to fly, are they? So if you can fly a TIE fighter, you're probably a pretty damn hot pilot. The stories over the years have almost made TIE pilots look like Skittles, like they make Imperial Stormtroopers look like Skittles. They're not. They wouldn't have took the galaxy if they were that easy to defeat. But that being said, if you've got that grounding as a soldier or grounding as a pilot, and then you can push on to do the things you really want to do, I think you make a brilliant point in that, you know, the rebellion is probably made up of a massive, General Maydean, massive percentage of ex-Imperial officers.
And I suppose, you know, for those kids who are on the backwater Outer Rim, the Empire is quite an aspirational outfit to join.
Yeah.
You see all the propaganda, come join the Empire, fly to all these beautiful and exotic worlds and all that kind of stuff. A bit like, I guess, how they like advertised the Navy in previous times, you know. So it makes sense. I guess you'd have to, as an agent, you need to pick your targets pretty precisely, because I'm sure there's a lot of counterintelligence. In fact, actually, in the Aftermath books, there you had Sinjir, who was a loyalty officer, who was basically, I think part of his role was to kind of like sniff out and root out some of these rebel sympathizers and that. And so there's probably quite a fear in the Empire amongst kind of the lower ranks that you've got to be seen to toe the line.
Absolutely. And again, a show like Cassian feels like the sort of show where, as well as seeing the bigger picture and all the other crazy stuff that's going on around the galaxy, and Cassian's own story, of which maybe this new actress coming into the show, obviously to be confirmed, could potentially be a big part of that. It's also that cat and mouse element, because the Empire probably doesn't take the rebellion too seriously at this point. They're an annoyance rather than a threat. It's not until Scarif and Yavin, two events that happen back to back, that all of a sudden it's like, no, they're not an annoyance, they are a threat. Which is why Empire makes so much sense when the Empire just clamps down, taxation goes up across the galaxy, the Imperial War Machine goes into overdrive, they stomp them off Hoth. It all makes sense in that respect. So it's a really interesting time of the galaxy to be telling stories in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be exciting to see what happens.
I'm Gareth Edwards, and you're listening to episode 50 of Making Tracks on Fantha Tracks Radio.
So as we mentioned at the top of the show, today is our 50th studio episode of Making Tracks. So we've been going since early 2018. We've had studio episodes, we've had special episodes, we've had live episodes from Celebration, we've had event episodes from conventions. But in terms of sitting down in our inverted commas studio, i.e. most usually our living room, it's our 50th episode. So we were fortunate enough to get a letter from San Francisco, from the Presidio, from Lucasfilm, congratulating us. And this is the letter. It's dated August the 18th, 2020, to the crew of Making Tracks. Greetings from Northern California. Everyone at Lucasfilm wanted to wish you all congratulations on reaching 50 episodes of your podcast. Like so many Star Wars fans, you've shown great dedication to the galaxy far, far away. During these unusual and difficult times, our shared interests keep us together and connect us from afar. We're ever grateful for the community's continued passion and work to keep the spirit of fandom alive and well. Please extend our fondest greetings to your listeners. We hope you're all celebrating this important milestone, and we wish you many more happy episodes to come. Once again, congratulations, and remember the Force will be with you always. Sincerely, your friends at Lucasfilm. Mark, we've been patted on the back by Lucasfilm. How good is that?
Ain't that nice? Well, I mean, it's you mainly. I've only just jumped on for the last 25 episodes. So Dave did the first 25, I think, and I've done the last 25. So it's worked out pretty well. And I suppose in some respects, nothing beats a good pandemic to allow you to kind of notch up the for podcast episode releases.
I say we've certainly been knocking them out the last few months, haven't we? It's weird how the way the world, and it's mentioned there, you know, these unusual and difficult times. You know how the way the world has been this year. I don't know how we're going to cope next year when things start to get back to normal. It's nice to get a letter like that, and it's greatly appreciated. And obviously, it's for all of us. You know, it's for Fantha Tracks as a whole, not just for Making Tracks. But very, very grateful to the team at Lucasfilm for sending us that. We're going to post that on the site as well, so people can read it up on the site. Thank you, Lucasfilm. It's very much appreciated.
Hi, this is Dave Chapman, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So on the 27th and 28th of August, Prop Store in LA are launching another auction. There's previews ahead of the actual auction itself, but we've had a chance to take a look through the catalogue, which is available online, and we'll put that in the show links. But as long with there being Star Trek and Alien and all sorts of franchises, there's a lot of Star Wars and Indiana Jones stuff in there, but obviously we're going to focus on the Star Wars stuff. If you're interested in Indy, by the way, page 183, but Star Wars kicks off on page 347 with, and I'll just mention the very first one, it's an unpainted miniature Tatooine building from the Phantom Menace. Just the little buildings that Shmi and Anakin lived in on Tatooine in Mos Espa, but you just roll through and there's scripts from Phantom Menace, there's lightsabers, dueling sabers, Jar Jar Binks' arm, which I'm sure will interest you, Mark. All sorts of stuff from Attack of the Clones. It's incredible. What catches your eye?
Oh, I mean, I tell you what, this Prop Store catalogue is like the Book of Dreams. I mean, step aside Argos catalogue. I mean, this is where it's at. I mean, there's just so much stuff. And I think if you're into collecting props or posters or scripts, there's something for everybody if you've got, the deep enough pockets. For me, I think out of all of these, I mean, it's hard to turn down the Stormtrooper helmet, the TK helmet from 77, just because it's so iconic. And I think without the Stormtrooper helmet, I don't think Star Wars would be quite the same. True. But for me, to save me having to make one, because I'm currently building an Endor Trooper, I would probably go for the Endor Trooper blaster rifle. The A280, which was kind of based on the M16 AR-15, and then they kind of added some greeblies and some modifications to the stock and stuff like that. That's probably what I would go for. And then I would just paint it up a little bit, and I would probably actually use that, because that's something that I think could probably use. It is actually a blank firing rifle, so it might be a bit heavy, so it might not be the most convenient to use for long events. But I mean, let's be fair, if you've got the chance to get, anything that's been used on screen, it's going to be amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, anything screen used, anything that's you've actually seen on Celluloid, that the images have been shared since you were a little kid. I mean, I'm looking at the one page I'm looking at here, article 669, the second draft Adventures of the Starkiller script. Beautiful red cover with an image on the front. It looks like a Frank Frazetta picture. I don't know if it was drawn for Star Wars or whether it's just taken from something else. Just incredible stuff. There was one Empire Strikes Back subway poster that was in New York, which was amazing. There's the touring costume of Darth Vader that would be identical to the actual costume seen on screen. That's going to go for insane money. There's Macquarie sketches, Lucy Autry-Wilson's signed copy of A New Hope, the gold cover.
And who was she? Just
she was Georgie's assistant. Just incredible deep dive stuff. People very closely. There's Hildebrandt stuff in here. Phil Tippett's put stuff in here. Right across the spectrum, John Mollo sketches. It's absolutely incredible. So if you've got the chance, please dive in, have a look, mooch around and dribble, because it is drool-worthy stuff. It really is absolutely incredible.
Phenomenal. I mean, basically, throughout all the lots, it kind of covers everything from pre-production right through to post-production. There's bits from, like you said, for concept art and the storyboards and the scripts through to ILM jackets. There's quite a few props, then movie posters and stuff like that. So there's tons. So, if anybody's feeling flush and wants to bid on stuff, you've heard what me and Mark would like. I'm sure we'll pay it back one way or another over time. So just, put in a bid for us, and if you get lucky, let us know.
We won't pay it back, Mark. We'll pay it forward. That's what you do.
Even better.
Well, Hello, this is Sam Whitwer, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
So because it's our 50th episode, and as Mark mentioned earlier, Mark has done 25 studio episodes, starting with episode 26, but somebody else did the first 25 episodes, and I'm very pleased to say that he's here with us today. Will you give a big round of applause wherever you're sitting, but hopefully not driving? Dave Tree. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Oh dear. Get the disclaimers in there quick. If anybody's driving, listening to this, or like operating heavy machinery, no applause is necessary. It's a pleasure to be back.
Good. Could not have you on episode 50 of all episodes. How have you been? What's been going on? Obviously, Empire 40 was a monster success.
Yeah, listeners, a couple of episodes ago, we were talking about Empire 40, which was, I think back when we did the interview, we were saying that we were aiming for around about 9 hours, and it turned into a gargantuan 12 hours, which if I'd known up front it was going to be that, I would have set the start time for 12 o'clock, not 2 o'clock, because by the time we're finishing, it's like, oh. But that was quite amazing. And then outside of that, summer holidays here in sunny Fording Bridge. So where everyone is trying to pick themselves up and dust themselves down post-lockdown. The tourism industry here is kind of sort of doing the same. So people coming down to see the donkeys, and I'm not talking about myself, but the horses and stuff like that, and buying toys. If it's sunny, Super Soakers and Nerf guns, and if it's raining, Lego and board games. But August is a good time of the month for toy retail because everybody's in a good mood. So may it continue.
You just mentioned Lego. We're going to talk about, and I can't believe it's happening, because when it happened in 1978, it was probably the coolest thing in the world until Empire Strikes Back came out. And then ever since, George Lucas swore he would hunt down every copy and burn it himself if he could. Star Wars Holiday Special. And now Disney, in their infinite wisdom, and Lego are doing the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. Before we even talk about it, and we don't know a huge amount about it, what do you think about them finally doing a Lego Star Wars Holiday Special? I'll kick off with you, Dave. What do you think?
Genuinely, if there was any license that was ever going to kind of dip back into that, the only one that could really get away with it is Lego, because it's not a serious representation of Star Wars. You know, it never has done. If you look at the video games, if you look at the animated specials that they do, it's always done with like tongue-in-cheek, jokey things. You know, it's not like this is 18 certificate stuff. You know, it's always been about having a bit of fun. It does fit in the realm of that. I'm surprised that they've decided to do that, going back to an original trilogy thing rather than try and do something within the current universe, given their current portfolio is heavily represented with The Rise of Skywalker at this point in time. But I would imagine that the moment someone does like a Lego version of Itchy, Lumpy and Marla, people are going to go, yeah, I want that.
Yeah.
You know, I can imagine people actually, you know, they might not even be Lego collectors, but because of what it is and what it represents, I can imagine it will recruit a certain number of people onto it. The trouble they've got is really explaining what the heck it is to the majority of their customer base, because we know what it is. You know, we're like ancient, we're like old fuddy-duddies when it comes to Star Wars, but the bulk of the Lego fan base won't even have a clue about what it is or the context. So will they actually get what it is, or will they just see a funny coloured Boba Fett and some Wookiees and go, oh, that's all we want? It's a strange call. But out of any of the different companies involved with the Star Wars license right now, if there was one that was going to get away with it, or that could get away with it and at least look credible, it's Lego.
What do you think, Mark? Do you agree?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the Star Wars Lego animated series and stuff I've done, like, you know, even the Freemakers and that, they're this weird mashup of like in-universe Star Wars and kind of almost breaking the fourth wall, because you have like ships that kind of need to be built up in the middle of space. It's going to be fun, because reading what they put up on stars.com, it's basically inspired by the original holiday special, as well as It's a Wonderful Life, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, and Christmas Vacation. So I'm guessing,
of course, all of those spring to mind when you say the holiday special.
Exactly. I mean, but also it's that whole thing of like, you know, Planes, Trains and Automobiles. That was like John Hughes, and that was kind of shot in the 80s. So it's, again, like you say, it's the average demographic for Lego is, you know, for his kind of content is going to be younger. That being said, the photo that they released shows Finn, Rey, Poe, and Rose, and Chewbacca. So you could almost possibly have some kind of retelling of either the original Star Wars Holiday Special through Chewbacca. Because, I mean, I'm guessing none of those other characters would probably know what Life Day is. So, of course, you've got to have a whole, well, Life Day means this and that. And so I'm hoping for, yes, Itchy and Lumpy to make their blocky appearance, and maybe even are we going to get an updated version of, like, is it Dina Carroll doing her little kind of holographic sexy dance?
Yeah. That was a most questionable scene. It really, really was. That Chewie's dad moment was really out of it. Dave makes a good point in the sense that Lego feels like the place that you can get away with that kind of thing.
Totally.
And doing a sequel to the holiday special. You think on that and you think, well, if ever they're going to ever fold in something Caravan of Courage style or Battle for Endor style, Lego would kind of work. It really is that it's cute enough that everybody kind of loves it. It works as its own thing because Lego doesn't just do Star Wars franchise, it does Potter, it does Batman and DC and Marvel and all the other stuff it does. So Lego works as its own thing doing Star Wars. So that works brilliantly. The holiday special, I mean, I'm just thinking already, maybe they won't release holiday special sets, but when you get to 2022, the next celebration, maybe the Lego special will be, Chewie with his little red robe on and Leia with her mouth wide open because she's singing the Life Day song or something. There's some great little opportunities for things that they could do. They'd fought Gormander with the 4 arms or Akmina in the cantina or whatever. There's some really cool stuff.
Am I right in thinking that they've made Life Day a thing at Galaxy's Edge?
Yeah, it's in the book, isn't it?
It's in the book, yeah.
But they actually do it as a day.
There's talk of doing it next year, though.
Yeah, coming. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They even going back, they did it in Star Wars Galaxies.
That's right, yeah.
So, I mean, it's quite nice that even whilst the holiday special may be derided for many a reason, the concept of having an in-universe holiday celebration has carried on through, which is quite nice. And, what with the recanonization and the legend stuff, it's nice that that's carried on as well, because it's one of those things that I think connects the original trilogy fans to this new era.
I think it's one of those things that on one hand, in theory, that's quite cool, but when it comes to the actual delivery and the reality of it, it's then just like, because that's how I felt about Family Guy, Star Wars, and dance games of Star Wars and stuff like that. The pre-Disney takeover, it just felt like Star Wars was just being dragged down and down and down in terms of its quality. And this is one of those moments where you're like, hey, I've got an idea. And it's like, yeah, that sounds quite cool. But then the execution of it is just kind of like, what are you doing? Question to both of you then. Do you think that this is, I mean, because we saw it actually, even at last year's celebration, they had the Boba Fett lunchbox from Holiday Special. Yeah. Do we think that possibly this is, this could cause demand or maybe a bit of pressure on Disney to actually finally release the original holiday special onto Disney Plus? Would you like to see it?
I'm surprised it hasn't turned up as sort of an Easter egg on a Blu-ray somewhere. Somebody's gone mooching around the title screens or something. There's a little link that no one's ever found to the holiday special.
The thing is, though, is it quite the same watching it in 1080p as it is with like the blurry, with the tracking lines and everything like that? Because now you actually just want to see it like that. If you saw it restored, you'd be kind of like, man, this is really SH1T kind of thing. Whereas if it is kind of like that, the music and
the
everything,
you totally need the tracking to be out,
and everything's super fuzzy and stuff like that, then you just kind of like, because you're then making excuses. Oh yeah, it's supposed to be like this. It's supposed to be really bad.
There you go. I suppose they could do 2 versions. And just pick the version you want. Do you want the
collector's edition?
Do you want the bootleg version or do you want the restored version? I mean, for all we know, there might even be, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is, a line in the Disney contract that Lucas signed, which basically forbids them ever, on pain of death, an extra $10 billion or something, to ever release the holiday special.
Comes out on Disney, which is spelt with a Z.
But you think there's like Return of the Ewok needs to come out, and there's like obviously Caravan of Courage and Battle for Endor, Ewoks and Droids. There's all these things from the sort of the early-ish. I mean, Ewoks and Droids aren't early; they're after Jedi, and so are the Ewok films. But there's that sort of era of stuff. But the earliest is a holiday special, isn't it? And obviously there's TV like Donnie and Marie and stuff like that they did, the actors did. But as an actual thing, the Star Wars holiday special, I think you're probably right. I think if George ever felt like he needed to give reparations to anyone, it's that however many million people watched that in November 1978 probably deserve some money back.
Was that shown in the UK?
No, it was shown once in the States on that, I forget what day in November, whatever day it was in November.
It was like Thanksgiving or something, wasn't it? Or near Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I remember buying my copy of that from a convention in Blackpool, in Blackpool.
Wow.
Like I think it was 97, 98, but I remember it was 25 quid.
Yeah.
I was like, what? that was back then, you know, like, you know, it's like 20 plus years ago, and you're just like, oh my word.
It was that sort of era when Kevin Rubio did Troops, wasn't it? It was all sort of within that sort of, And
when they did the big scene at Toshi Station, and, you know, I had a bootleg copy of that before it ended up on Making Magic and stuff like that. Yeah, it was shown somewhere, and someone had like a video camera, and it's kind of it wasn't front on; it's completely skewed.
But, the 10th anniversary convention that they did in '87 when Lucas met Roddenberry, it was probably shown at that. It was probably bootlegs all came from places like that.
Probably was. To me, anything like this was like gold dust. You know, back at like deleted scenes or something that's slightly different from the thing that you know inside out. It's like, oh yeah. I'll pay money.
Take my kidney.
Take it.
Yeah.
So all in all, we think Lego Star Wars Holiday Special, it's a good thing.
Yeah, let's wait and see. I mean, you know, we're all going to keep tabs on that one. I would imagine that Lego a good enough sense of humor. And don't forget, you can have the Mandalorian appearing in it because he's got the same kind of rifle thing that
totally. Yeah.
Cartoon. So like
there's going to definitely be a cash in on the Baby Yoda, surely.
Basically, it's going to be a success because it's Lego and people will be queuing around the block.
You're listening to Fantha Tracks. Flip through the galaxy of literature with Cannon Fodder hosts Brian Cameron, Matt Booker, Mark Newbold, and Mark Mulcaster.
Count me in.
Spin round the rim with Desert Planet Discs. Your musical journey through the space lanes with your hosts, Carl Bayless and Greg Robertson.
The hottest tunes this side of Moss Isley. Happy!
Get the latest news, interviews, reviews, and much more on Making Tracks with your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
Like an Ewok battle wagon out of control.
Join hosts Claire Henry and a rotating panel of guest hosts for the podcast that's full of hope. Planet Leia.
I love you.
I know.
It's time to head south with the Fantha from Down Under, Adam O'Brien.
Oh, g'day, mate. How you going?
Start your engines with Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold as they lift the hood on starships, airspeeders, swoops, capital ships, and more from across the cosmos. And for everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Greg McLaughlin writes in, given the grim numbers from Disney's latest earnings call, do you feel more or less relieved television being the home of Star Wars for the near future? He goes on to write, but he's not too worried for a year or two delay in the movies, but because there's such an investment for movies, but one has to be concerned about Disney being a bit gun shy to lay out a huge investment given the current climate and the earnings for the latest two films. Let's put this to Dave first. Are you happy with the near future of Star Wars being rooted on TV and on Disney Plus?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been so spoiled over the last few years that we've had a Star Wars movie release every single year. It's very easy to forget that up to that point, we didn't have anything for 10 years. The only home of Star Wars, arguably, was already on TV thanks to the Clone Wars. To me, Star Wars has always been beyond the movies anyway. At its core, that's its roots are from. But so much has been put into this from the point of view of the books, the comics, the video games, the TV shows and stuff like that. And in many respects, they have the opportunity to do more with it than they would be able to do with a film, because you can not so much take more risks, but you can be a bit more expansive than you could ever be with a film because there's just too much at stake. A prime example is when it comes to books, everybody's got their favorite story arcs and things like that, comics as well, and the video games. You're not necessarily into every single book or comic or video game, but you're into, say, like Rogue Squadron as books and comics. You know, you can pick and choose the things that you like. With the films coming out every single year, there is not enough time to really give the spotlight on each of those films that we have had in the past. The original trilogy and the prequel trilogy always had 3 years between each release, which gave you a chance to look at all of that expansive story that's in there, you know, all that background information. You know, I can pretty much tell you, not perfect, but I can tell you all the different background characters and bits about them from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, but I couldn't tell you that about the sequel trilogy. You know, if you were to show me a picture from the visual dictionary, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, that's Aldar Bedo or, you know, or whatever, because I recognize the picture, but I couldn't tell you who it is or what it is. And some of that you get because it gives a bit of time to have a look at all of that, this amazing stuff that's gone into creating all of this, that you then get a toy, you then get a comic, or, you know, it ends up in other things. You know, you start learning a bit more about these characters. And don't get me wrong, there is so much available that has been generated over the last 5 years that is ripe for. I've said before that Beckett from Solo, I think, has a huge opportunity there for him to be able to, like, you know, have his own spin-off TV show in the same way that Cassian has, the way we got Mandalorian. You know, you can go in a million different directions without it like crossing over and things like that. Yes, the films are what really makes a big chunk of money, but also at the same time, it's the one that costs the most amount of money. And the more that they do with things like The Mandalorian, and the more that they build up confidence, a team of people, and like the right kind of production schedule to be able to like knock things out, then the quicker and easier it is to create content for Disney Plus going forward. Equally, we've just touched on it talking about the Lego stuff. There's stuff on Disney Plus that still hasn't come about, and I'm not saying about the holiday show, the holiday special, but you got all the Ewoks and Droids cartoons. You know, I've got 9 hours of Ewoks cartoons. I mean, who does that? But like, you know, there's a huge amount that they've got there. So you've got all this stuff that you can go back and dip your toe in that well and learn about all this other stuff. So there's plenty of content to keep us going with stuff that can be made and stuff that has already been made, but they've still yet to release. That'll tie you over until as and when a next film comes. There's nothing really to worry about. Everyone's been affected with the pandemic, but I don't think it's going to affect Star Wars in any way. If anything, I think it will give them confidence to actually produce a better product, because it's giving them a bit of time to review and work out what it is that they're doing, rather than just like, we got a deadline, we need to get it out. We got a deadline, we need to get it out, you know, because that's how it feels like it's been over the last few years, which isn't bad. We've got stuff that we've never had before, but I also feel like at times it's because you got that deadline and all hell will break loose if you miss it, that you could have maybe have approached things in a different way, or structured things, or if you had a bit more time, could it have been done differently. And that's not at the expense of the story. It's just being able to like deliver a much better thing. And that then also then helps all the licensors as well, because they can't keep up with this stuff. You know, it's difficult for them. So they need a bit of breathing space as much as anybody else, and allows you to appreciate more each of the films, because so much goes into it. If you can like learn about all these fringe characters and stuff like that, you then just get more invested in it. So rather than the eternal struggle of do you like The Last Jedi or not, everything's black and white. You're just literally getting to like understand more about it. And if you can find out more about these characters and more is in there with the background stories, you get to appreciate it more. And it'll disarm a lot of people, rather than like Happy Meal toy, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one. That's a long answer. I'm very sorry.
No, don't apologise.
Mr. Dave Tree, everybody.
25 episodes.
Fantatrax.
Hoodoo! Me and Mark have talked about this a lot on the show. Why Star Wars has got a future on television. The fact that if Star Wars originally in 77 hadn't have been a hit, the next Star Wars product you probably would have been Splinter of the Mind's Eye as a TV movie. So you know, there's all these different avenues that could have happened for Star Wars. You say about how there's been so much content coming out in the last 5 years, which is great. But now Star Wars is now driven by, you know, a board and shareholders, and it's part of Disney, and it's not an independent company when George was running it. So it's a different concern completely. And that sometimes it does feel like they're thinking, we've got to get to May 25th to get Solo out, or we've got to get to, you know, December 16th to get whatever out, you know, and they are chasing their tail to get the content out. And the stuff that is out there now isn't monopolised upon. And I say monopolised in a positive sense, that if you look at the Cantina aliens in Star Wars, how every character in there has had a story in some media, be it in a computer game or in a TV show or in a comic or a book or whatever, you know, a Tales from Jabba's Palace type scenario. everybody's had a story told, and yet you look at Maz's Castle, and I would wager you've probably not had stories about every character in there or any other locale from the new films. You know, all the characters you saw in Solo. You mentioned Beckett. Solo's ripe for plundering for more stories, and maybe Disney Plus is the place to do it. So yeah, you're right. I think TV feels like a fertile ground to expand what we know, because like you say, if you know more about the characters in the films, the film means more to you because you've invested the time to learn about it.
Do you feel that if there is a bit of a gap, if we say like Rise of Skywalker, did Rise of Skywalker feel a little bit more special because there'd been an 18-month gap?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and
rather than like every 12 months, if you see what I mean, because there was a bit more, not so much because it's where they were saying end of the era and end of Skywalker and all that, but it was just more of it felt more of an occasion. Yeah. So if it is a 3-year gap, it's like, oh, here we go.
Totally.
I've been waiting for this.
It's the circus coming to town, isn't it? Every 3 years, or between trilogies. You know, we had 16 years between Jedi and Phantom Menace. We had 10 years between Revenge of the Sith and Force Awakens. And I know, like you rightly pointed out, we had the Clone Wars movie and then the TV series. You know, so there was, and you mentioned Family Guy, Star Wars, and Robot Chicken, Star Wars, and all that stuff, which is peripheral, but it's still keeping the name in the zeitgeist. But as a main event movie turning up at the cinemas, which is really what it's all about, the circus comes to town when it turns up at your local multiplex, and you're buying popcorn and making a night of it. That's the main event element, not plonking on your sofa. Which is what the way it's going is that you'll just clear the sofa and watch something on telly and pause it and go out and go for a wee and come back, make a cup of tea, whatever. But when you go to the cinema, it's got you captivated because there's no pause button at the cinema. So that's the main event aspect. Because, you know, when Jedi finished, we thought that was it. We really thought that was it, especially as kids. It's like, well, we're done now. That's it. And then Revenge of the Sith finishes and the whole marketing was the circle is now complete. Well, that's it. Star Wars is done. You can tell by the way John Williams scores the end credits. It's like, this is it. It's done.
This is it, exactly.
You know.
Yeah. After The Force Awakens, and Dave, I'm sure you can kind of reflect on this as well, you know, there was a diary that you could set. So you kind of had your Force Friday, then you had your film release in December, then you had your Blu-ray home release, and then you'd have your Force Friday, and it repeated for, 3 or 4 years. And it was very hard, as you said, appreciate what was coming out, because you're also trying to look forward to the next stuff. So you're thinking about what's the next film going to be, and you're not necessarily trying to fill in your collection gaps with all the Rogue One figures. You're now moving on to like the Last Jedi figures, which are just coming out like in the next couple of months. So I personally think a break is good. With the TV series taken with the main focus for time being, it's still allowing for merchandise and collectibles to be produced, and more importantly, for more diverse stories to be explored. What we really want is good stories set in the Star Wars universe, not necessarily they always have to be a Star Wars film. So Mark and myself have talked about this quite a bit, using Cassian as the vehicle to introduce you to a whole world or a whole different kind of area of the galaxy. The same with The Mandalorian. And I think that is where there's a benefit, because like you said, with a film, you've got to keep your narrative condensed and tight, because it's only 2 hours or maybe 2 hours 20. But then when you get into TV series, we're talking about 4, maybe 5 hours, and you can expand stuff. You can kind of let things breathe. For instance, if we were to take The Mandalorian, all 8 episodes, and actually go, right, so if we were to make a film out of that, it would probably be chapter 1, maybe chapter 2, chapter 3, and then chapters like 7 and 8.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd go to like the planet where they're just like fishing for blue
Shrimp.
prawns, shrimp, that's it. Yeah, exactly. You're probably not going to have a prison planet, so Matt Lanter's not going to get his cameo, stuff like that. And you're probably not going to return to Tatooine.
Yeah.
There's avenues and there's ways to expand the galaxy without necessarily having to rely on films. But like Mark says, Star Wars has always been a big occasion. It's something that actually a Star Wars film, everybody, you know, the media, the general casual fans, the hardcore fans, and those who are kind of slightly interested, get geared up for, especially once there's been a bit of a break. But I think Disney need to find that balance as well. We don't want to get inundated with TV series that actually when a Star Wars show gets released, it's not a big deal. And at the same time, we don't want TV series to necessarily overshadow the film releases.
I agree completely. And where you're saying about things like The Mandalorian, if you did not have the films over the last 5 years and only looked at the stuff that has been officially released in the form of The Mandalorian, Clone Wars season, whatever it is, Rebels, you would go, this is the best Star Wars ever.
Yeah.
If you took the films out of it and just looked at the TV produced stuff, I think everybody would say, this is what Star Wars is always meant to be. Yeah. Because you got a prequel thing that has just literally amped it all up. You got an original trilogy thing or pre-original trilogy thing that everybody is like going, oh wow, this has got all the right things. And then you got a post-original trilogy thing that is going on, what happened after Return of the... If you never had the sequel trilogy, Solo and Rogue One, I bet everybody would be going, absolutely, everybody would be on the same page right now saying Star Wars is amazing. So in a roundabout way, if you can think like that rather than, oh no, it means we're not getting any more films, we're already doing really good.
Yeah.
Could be argued that you've actually got the best Star Wars content being generated than you've ever had. I know that's very much up for debate, but I think the films overshadow everything to such a degree, people don't look at, well, what else is there that is actually Star Wars and go, you know what? This is awesome. This is absolutely fantastic. Hands down, if you had Rebels, Clone Wars going concurrently and Mandalorian, you'd just be like, we've never had it so good. I guarantee it. And that's not even going into the sequel trilogy stuff we have had with the films. We still got all that to potentially come in one. Oh, and Resistance. Yeah, we have been spoiled.
As Star Wars fans, we seem to be kind of almost inbuilt to wish for the Star Wars that we haven't had or we didn't get, and ignore the stuff or take for granted the stuff that we do have. I think that is something that, as Star Wars fans, maybe we need to all take a step back and actually go, okay, whatever we thought of the sequel trilogy, love, hate, or detest it, think about everything else. And, not everybody needs to love everything from all different parts of Star Wars. There's enough Star Wars now for everybody to have some kind of crossover of stuff that they like and some stuff that they don't like. And the stuff you don't like, if it offends you that much, just don't worry about it. Ignore it. Wipe it from your headcanon if you need to. We are kind of spoiled, and hopefully, all things being well, with lockdowns easing and production starting back up, we're going to have a great Mandalorian Season 2 coming in October, and then some great series coming next year.
This is Steve Bloom, voice of Zebralios, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Caravast. May the force be with you.
Dave, where can people find you?
You can find me in my shop in all the cool stuff in Fordingbridge in Hampshire. If you can't make it to the shop, you can find us online at the Facebook page, All the Cool Stuff. Or alternatively, if you want to keep it purely Star Wars related, you can find me on Facebook at Farthest From, which is the show that we do all about vintage toys and things like that. But come and find us, drop by, say hello. That would be fantastic. How about yourself, Mark?
Yeah, where can we find you, Mark? Where are you normally?
Where? Always asking the questions.
Yeah, always asking the questions. In fairness, you can find me on Instagram. I am unfortunately just titled as M Mulcaster. You should be able to find me on Facebook, because the last time I checked, I was the only Mark Mulcaster on Facebook, which is something I'm still pretty proud of. Hit me up.
You Google whacked yourself.
Better than number wanging.
Indeed. Right, so swiftly on.
We're speaking for Fantha Tracks. If you want to stay part of the action, stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, you can visit fanthatracks.com or check out the Fantha Tracks app, which is awesome, through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Episode 51 coming up next. We need listeners' questions, so get them in. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fantha Tracks. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review. Please leave some 5-star ones on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. Mark, Dave, thank you so much for being on episode 50. It's been awesome.
Congrats, guys.
Thanks, Dave. Take care.
Woohoo! Woohoo!
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.